Spirits and ghostly apparitions have been with us since forever. Early civilizations like the Mesopotamians, the Egyptians, the Greeks, and the Romans have had sightings of these ghostly things. But then there's been this long-standing hypothesis that perhaps these apparitions were just a trick of the eye, because glasses weren't invented up until 1200 or 1300, the 13th century. And these glasses at that time were only as an aid for nearsightedness, just to see things that are nearby, like when you're reading. The Celtics and the Scots apparently have this real live monster that surpasses the invention of glasses and cameras, and they even have a photograph of it. One sinister fact about the world out of many is that we've only explored 26.1% of our oceans as of 2024. So that leaves a good majority of our waters virtually unexplored. So if the Loch Ness Monster came out today in some random body of water, I'd probably not be more surprised than someone who saw it like 100 years ago. But wait, before I get labeled as a peddler of false information, there have been some debunking of this theory of the Loch Ness Monster. Though I do love myself a good conspiracy theory, the majority of credible science explains that perhaps the existence of Nessie is just a hoax. Compiled by Vox, there are tons of evidence suggesting that Nessie isn't real. Historically, we used to confirm the presence of living life, or life that has lived, through fossils or bones. But the thing is, not one bone has been found for Nessie. And as it turns out, the Loch Ness isn't even good real estate for Nessie because it's too small, it's too cold, it's too icy. And furthermore, the Mandela effect may have had like a crucial role of making people believe that it was real. Just blame another fictional monster. So perhaps the existence of a Nessie-like monster could be possible in a bigger, warmer, not icy body of water, considering that 3/4 of our oceans are still unexplored. And that with enough psychosocial nudging, we can maybe convince ourselves that it can be real. But then here's a thought. Like, after exploring 99.9% of the oceans, there's like still no sighting of Nessie, let's say. But then somehow you just see Nessie, you talk to her like Bubby from The Misadventures of Flapjack.
You better help him with those legs so you can walk your sorry butt home. I'll fight you, Whale!
But it can be real, like the numbers and the data and the media says so. So it gets to a point. Is the world hiding things from you? It's way easier to prove the existence of something anyway than to deny the entirety of it. But then, who's gonna believe you? Schizophrenia is a mental illness, not a physical one. Or at least not directly anyway. Though you'd need to perceive and prompt auditory and visual hallucinations in order of the general frequency to support your case. Other symptoms of this mental illness include disorganization of thoughts, and another is anhedonia, or like you can't experience pleasure, you can't experience fun. You are a party pooper by default. And critically, impaired sensory perception. So if schizophrenia is a mental illness of the altered perception of reality, can someone born without one of these senses get diagnosed with it at all? As prevalent science shows, it's possible for all but one. An article by Health Central in 2020 speculates on why no diagnosed schizophrenic has been congenitally blind. The first path of logic are as follows. When one sense closes, another one or others open. So let's take, for example, the most frequent and one of the most telltale signs for schizophrenia, which is auditory hallucinations. When people have auditory hallucinations, it's difficult to distinguish whether it's your real voice or not. And here's the thing with congenitally blind people. The visual cortex of their brain, since it's not used, can be repurposed into learning, language, and memory, which strengthens the perception of reality that they can perceive, but also simplifying the mere aspect of it. And this repurposing is something that the auditory systems cannot perform. And since congenitally blind people who cannot perceive sight at all do not use the visual systems of their brain, they tend to use other areas of their brain more carefully. So the more sure they are of their auditory perception of their surroundings, the less prone they are to perceiving something entirely else. Those who are not congenitally blind but have acquired blindness early throughout their life share some of these protective factors, just because they haven't relied on visual input entirely enough to disrupt it. And for the congenitally blind, there's nothing to disrupt at all. So those that could not whip up any visual image cannot whip up false images at all. The blind can still hear auditory hallucinations, but there's just nothing else to anchor it to. So not being able to use the visual cortex of your brain from the start can have it repurposed, strengthening your anchor on the reality that you can perceive while simplifying the perception of it. So those are two areas that clearly fight against the diagnosis.
I think if I were able to get sight, I think I would have tremendous headaches the first few weeks of it because of all this brand new information to process that I've never experienced in my life before.
But what about those who can see but can't hear? Since the 2000s, it's no news that congenitally deaf people can and have been diagnosed with schizophrenia, partially because of the fact that they can still feel and see sound. Everyone who has working proprioception can feel vibrations, and the deaf can actually feel these vibrations more clearly. And these vibrations are essentially what makes up sound. Moving lips are an example of a mental image of a sound for people who have never heard it. As with congenitally blind people not being able to experience true visual hallucinations, the congenitally deaf can also not experience true auditory hallucinations. So not all of them can have an inner voice, but somehow, some can still manifest it. A 2006 study suggests that there can be a misattribution of inner thoughts as internal or external sounds or voices, which are due to the same visual motor processes that connect the two. So basically, when you can't hear and connect audition to how you perceive and communicate, your body finds a way to strengthen that visual sense on how you perceive and communicate. Since audition is more closely linked with communication rather than just sound itself, making the lack of audition just more vulnerable to disorganized thought. So if auditory hallucinations are much more common and one of, if not the hallmark of psychosis, then what makes vision so damning? For one, vision is the brain's primary tool for reality building. Visual systems can help anchor a person into space, time. When there is an irregularity in how we perceive space, time, and motion, we get an altered predictive version of that same reality. And a lack of visual input can lead to not being able to predict an actual visual reality at all. So congenital or early blindness is hypothesized to stop visual destabilization at its core, like before it even starts. There is a stronger anchor on executive functions despite the difference or the absence of mental imageries. To see is to believe, right?